June morning, small-town courthouse. Humid Carolina air, thick with gossip. 16-year-old Lacy Downs strutted through the doors with her signature pastel nails and a grin like she was stepping onto a red carpet. For Lacy, this was not justice. It was content. Each hearing was a stage, every blink choreographed for the cameras. Charged with involuntary manslaughter, she framed the death of her friend Tessa Marlowe as a tragic accident from a harmless livestream prank. "We were just having fun," she told reporters, mask of innocence glittering under fluorescent lights. But investigators kept digging. They found fragments of data, cached videos, deleted uploads, and one final recording, a full, uncut stream, would expose her smile as the weapon it truly was. A single video would strip away the filters and reveal the predator behind the performance. By the time the judge spoke her name for the last time, there would be no audience cheering, no ring light, no scripted tears. Just the truth, playing back in unfiltered real time. The Meadow Ridge County Courthouse had never seen anything like Lacy Downs. When she entered for her arraignment that June morning, she moved through the lobby with the practiced ease of someone who had spent years cultivating a public persona. Her orange jumpsuit, standard issue for defendants in custody, somehow looked almost intentional on her, the white undershirt crisp beneath. She had managed to apply mascara and lip gloss before her appearance, and her blonde hair fell in carefully arranged waves over her shoulders. The bailiffs escorted her through the corridor, and with each step, Lacy turned her head slightly toward the cameras, offering small smiles, even mouthing the words, "Love you guys," to a cluster of local news photographers who captured every frame. The courtroom was packed. On one side sat the Marlowe family, Tessa's parents and her younger sister Emma, all dressed in black, their faces hollow with grief. On the other side, a cluster of Lacy's followers and curious onlookers filled the benches, some holding phones despite the ban on recording, whispering excitedly as if waiting for a concert to begin. The prosecutor, Sandra Hillman, sat at her table reviewing notes, her expression hard and focused. Hillman was in her early 50s, a career prosecutor with a reputation for methodical preparation and an unshakable sense of justice. She had reviewed the case files dozens of times, and each reading had deepened her resolve. Lacy's defense attorney was Mitchell Grant, a well-dressed lawyer in his late 30s who specialized in high-profile cases. Grant had been hired by Lacy's parents, who had mortgaged their home to afford his fees. He sat beside Lacy now, leaning in to whisper instructions she barely seemed to hear. She was too busy scanning the gallery, counting the cameras, estimating how many people were watching. Judge Eleanor Briggs entered, and the courtroom rose. Briggs was a stern woman in her 60s, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. She had presided over Meadow Ridge County Superior Court for 15 years and had developed a keen sense for when defendants were performing rather than participating in their own defense. As she took her seat and looked down at Lacy Downs, she felt a familiar unease. This girl was playing a role. The clerk read the charges. "Lacy Downs, you are charged with involuntary manslaughter in the death of Tessa Marie Marlowe. How do you plead?" Lacy stood, smoothing her jumpsuit, and spoke in a voice that carried just enough tremor to sound vulnerable. "Not guilty, Your Honor." She paused, then added, "This was a terrible accident. I loved Tessa." Judge Briggs studied her for a moment. "Your plea is entered." She set a trial date and addressed the attorneys regarding bail. Given the seriousness of the charge and concerns about witness intimidation, bail is denied. Miss Downs will remain in custody pending trial. Lacy's smile faltered for just a second, then returned. As the bailiffs moved to escort her out, she turned toward the cameras once more and gave a small wave, a peace sign held up briefly before her hands were cuffed again. The gesture was captured by every photographer in the room. Sandra Hillman watched this performance with cold clarity. She leaned toward her co-counsel, a younger attorney named David Park, and whispered, "She thinks this is a game. We need to show the jury who she really is." Park nodded. "The recovered data is going to be crucial. The tech team is still working on the cloud backup." Hillman gathered her files. "Then we wait, and we build the case brick by brick until there is nowhere left for her to hide." The investigation had begun 3 weeks earlier. Detective Araceli McPherson had been the first law enforcement officer to arrive at the old Crestfall quarry, a location popular with local teenagers, despite repeated warnings and no trespassing signs. The quarry was a jagged scar in the landscape, an abandoned mining site with steep cliffs that dropped 60 feet to water below. Over the years, it had been the site of several accidents, and the county had tried repeatedly to fence it off, but teens always found a way in. When McPherson arrived that afternoon, she found a cluster of teenagers standing near the edge, some crying, others on their phones. A boy named Marcus was shouting into his cell, trying to give directions to emergency services. McPherson parked her patrol car and approached quickly, her hand instinctively moving to her radio. "What happened here?" she demanded. A girl stepped forward, her face streaked with tears. "Tessa fell. She was up there on the ledge with Lacy, and she fell. Oh my God, she fell." McPherson looked toward the edge and saw Lacy Downs sitting on a rock, her phone in her hand, her face oddly calm. Lacy was scrolling through her screen, her thumb moving rhythmically. McPherson approached her. "Miss, I need you to put the phone down." Lacy looked up, startled, then smiled. "Oh, thank God you are here. It was an accident. We were doing a live stream, just a prank thing, and Tessa slipped. I tried to grab her, but I could not reach her in time." McPherson studied Lacy's face. The girl showed no visible signs of distress, no tears, no trembling, just that strange, practiced calm. "Where is your friend now?" Lacy pointed toward the edge. "She fell into the water. I do not know if she can swim." McPherson radioed for emergency dive teams and paramedics, then secured the scene. She took statements from the other teens present, all of whom described a similar story. Lacy and Tessa had been filming a video at the quarry, some kind of prank or challenge for their social media followers. They had been standing near the edge, laughing and talking, when suddenly Tessa had fallen. No one had seen exactly how it happened because they had all been watching from farther back. But Marcus, the boy who had called 911, pulled McPherson aside. "Something was off," he said quietly. "Lacy was arguing with Tessa before the stream started. I heard her say something like, 'You are going to regret stealing from me.'" McPherson made a note. "Do you know what she meant by that?" Marcus shrugged. "I think it was about followers. Tessa's channel had been growing faster than Lacy's lately. Lacy was pretty obsessed with that stuff." The dive team recovered Tessa's body 2 hours later. She had died on impact, her skull fractured from hitting the rocks before entering the water. The medical examiner would later confirm that death had been instantaneous. McPherson returned to the station and began pulling together the evidence. She requested Lacy's phone, which had been taken into evidence at the scene. The phone was locked, but a warrant allowed the tech team to access it. What they found was a digital trail of obsession and jealousy. Lacy's social media accounts were a monument to narcissism. Thousands of photos, each meticulously edited and filtered. Her follow account was displayed prominently in her bio, and she posted multiple times a day, tracking likes and comments with the intensity of a stockbroker watching market trends. But in recent months, her engagement had been declining. Tessa Marlowe's account, by contrast, had been growing rapidly. Tessa's content was more authentic, less manufactured, and audiences had responded. The tech team found direct messages between Lacy and Tessa, and the tone had grown increasingly hostile. In one exchange from 2 weeks before the incident, Lacy had written, "You copied my aesthetic and now everyone thinks you are original. You are a fraud." Tessa had replied simply, "I am just being myself, Lacy. Maybe you should try it." That message had been followed by a flurry of angry responses from Lacy, including the phrase, "I made you. I can unmake you too." McPherson read through the messages with growing concern. This was not a prank gone wrong. This was a motive. The tech team also discovered that Lacy had been live streaming at the time of the incident. The stream had been briefly visible on her account before being deleted minutes after Tessa's fall. But live streams, once broadcast, often left traces. The tech team began searching for cached data, archived copies, anything that might have been saved by viewers or backup systems. It took 2 weeks, but they found it. A cloud backup service that Lacy used for her photos had automatically saved a copy of the live stream. The file was large, high resolution, and complete. When the tech team played it back, McPherson watched in silence as the truth unfolded on the screen. The trial began on a sweltering August morning. The courtroom was even more crowded than it had been for the arraignment. News vans lined the street outside, and reporters jockeyed for position. Inside, the jury had been seated. 12 men and women from Meadow Ridge County who had been selected after days of voir dire. Sandra Hillman had fought to exclude anyone who followed Lacy on social media, and she had succeeded in assembling a jury that seemed willing to focus on evidence rather than celebrity. Lacy entered the courtroom with the same confidence she had displayed before. She had styled her hair again, and she wore the faintest hint of makeup. As she took her seat beside Mitchell Grant, she glanced toward the jury and offered a small, sympathetic smile, as if to say, "I know you will understand." Judge Briggs called the court to order, and Hillman stood to deliver her opening statement. She approached the jury box, her expression serious. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about a young woman who valued her image more than human life. Lacy Downs cultivated a persona online, a brand built on popularity and attention. When her friend Tessa Marlowe began to surpass her, Lacy saw her not as a person, but as a threat. And on June 6th, at the Crestfall Quarry, Lacy Downs decided to eliminate that threat. She pushed Tessa Marlowe off a 60-foot ledge, killing her instantly. Then she deleted the evidence, told a lie, and smiled for the cameras. Hillman let the words settle. "The evidence will show that this was not an accident. It was murder disguised as content. And by the end of this trial, you will see Lacy Downs not as the victim she pretends to be, but as the calculating killer she truly is." Mitchell Grant stood for the defense. He was smooth, polished, and he spoke with a kind of calm authority that could sway uncertain jurors. Ladies and gentlemen, what happened at the quarry was a tragedy, but it was not murder. These were two teenage girls, friends, who made a terrible mistake. They went to a dangerous location to film a video, and in the chaos and excitement, Tessa Marlowe slipped and fell. Lacy Downs tried to save her. She reached for her, but she could not. And now, instead of being allowed to grieve, Lacy is being prosecuted for a crime she did not commit. Grant gestured toward Lacy, who had lowered her head, her shoulders shaking slightly as if holding back tears. The state wants you to believe that Lacy is a monster, but she is a child, a 16-year-old girl who made a mistake and has been living with the guilt ever since. I ask you to see her for who she truly is. Hillman called her first witness, Marcus Chen, the boy who had been at the quarry that day. Marcus took the stand nervously, his hands gripping the armrests. Hillman asked him to describe what he had seen. "We all went to the quarry that afternoon," Marcus said. "Lacy had texted a bunch of us, said she was doing a big stream and wanted people there. When we got there, she and Tessa were already up on the ledge." "What were they doing?" "Talking. At first it seemed normal, like they were setting up for the video, but then I heard Lacy's voice get louder. She was saying something to Tessa, something angry." "Could you hear what she said?" Marcus nodded. "She said, 'You will regret stealing my followers.' I heard that part clearly." "What happened next?" Marcus swallowed hard. "They were standing really close to the edge. Lacy had her phone out like she was recording. Then there was a scream, and Tessa was falling. It happened so fast. 1 second she was there, and the next she was gone." "What did Lacy do after Tessa fell?" Marcus looked toward Lacy, who was staring at him with an expression that might have been hurt or might have been fury. She just stood there for a second. Then she looked at her phone. She was messing with her phone while the rest of us were screaming for help. On cross-examination, Grant tried to soften the testimony. "Mr. Chen, you said you heard arguing, but is it not true that Lacy and Tessa often joked around, that their banter could sound harsh to outsiders?" Marcus hesitated. "I guess. But this did not sound like joking." "You were standing how far away?" "Maybe 30 feet. "And there was wind that day, was there not?" "A little, yeah." "So it is possible you misheard." Marcus frowned. "I know what I heard." Grant let it go and sat down. The seed of doubt had been planted, however small. The next witness was one of Tessa's classmates, a girl named Simone, who had been a follower of both Tessa and Lacy online. Simone testified that Lacy had grown increasingly jealous as Tessa's account gained traction. She was obsessed with numbers, Simone said. She would check her follower count like every 5 minutes. And when Tessa started getting brand deals, Lacy lost it. Hillman introduced screenshots of direct messages Lacy had sent to followers, messages in which she had mocked Tessa and spread rumors about her. In one message, Lacy had written, "Tessa is fake. I made her popular and she stabbed me in the back. Watch. I will make her irrelevant again." Grant objected to the introduction of the messages, arguing they were prejudicial. Judge Briggs allowed them, noting that they established motive. The forensic evidence came next. A digital forensics expert named Dr. Raymond Tsai took the stand. Dr. Tsai had examined Lacy's phone and her social media accounts. He explained to the jury how live streaming worked, how data was transmitted and stored. When a user goes live on a platform, Dr. Tsai said, the video is broadcast in real time. But many platforms also create temporary backup files in case of connection issues. These files are often stored in cloud services linked to the user's account. Hillman asked, "Did you find such a backup in this case?" Dr. Tsai nodded. Yes, Lacy Downs had her phone set to automatically back up media files to a cloud storage service. When she went live on June 6th, the stream was saved to that cloud account. Was this backup deleted? An attempt was made to delete it, yes. But cloud services often retain files even after deletion, especially if the deletion occurs shortly after upload. We were able to recover the file in its entirety. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Judge Briggs called for silence. Hillman continued, "Dr. Tsai, were you able to authenticate this video, to confirm it had not been altered?" Dr. Tsai pulled out a folder of documents. "Yes, we examined the metadata embedded in the file. Metadata includes information about when the file was created, what device was used, and whether any edits were made. In this case, the metadata confirmed that the video was recorded on Lacy Downs' phone at 4:23 in the afternoon on June 6th. There were no edits, no cuts, no alterations. This is the original file, as it was broadcast." Grant cross-examined, trying to raise questions about the reliability of metadata, but Dr. Tsai was unshakable. The science was sound. As the trial progressed, the prosecution built a meticulous case. They called Tessa's boyfriend, a quiet boy named Andrew, who testified that Tessa had been afraid of Lacy in the days before her death. "She told me Lacy had been sending her threatening messages," Andrew said, his voice breaking. "She said Lacy told her she would pay for stealing her spotlight." They called a teacher from the high school who described an incident 2 months earlier when Lacy had confronted Tessa in the hallway, shouting at her in front of other students. The teacher had broken up the fight, but the animosity had been clear. They called the medical examiner, who testified about the nature of Tessa's injuries. The fall had killed her instantly. There were no defensive wounds, no signs that she had tried to catch herself, which suggested she had been caught off guard. Throughout all of this, Lacy maintained her performance. She dabbed at her eyes with tissues during emotional testimony. She shook her head sadly when witnesses described her jealousy. She leaned toward Grant and whispered comments that seemed designed to be overheard by the jury. "This is so unfair," she murmured. "They are making me sound like a monster." But Judge Briggs was watching, and she saw through it. During a recess, Grant pulled Lacy aside in the holding room adjacent to the courtroom. He sat across from her, his expression strained. "Lacy, you need to stop performing for the cameras." Lacy blinked at him, her expression innocent. "I do not know what you mean." Grant leaned forward. "The jury is not stupid. They can see that you are playing to the gallery. You need to show genuine emotion, real remorse." Lacy's smile thinned. "I am showing remorse." "No," Grant said sharply. "You are showing what you think remorse looks like. There is a difference. If that video gets introduced, and I think it will, we are going to need the jury to believe you have changed, that you regret what happened. Right now, they do not believe that." Lacy crossed her arms. "The video does not show what they think it shows." Grant stared at her. "Have you watched it?" Lacy looked away. "I do not need to. I was there." Grant rubbed his face, exhausted. "We are running out of options, Lacy. If you do not start taking this seriously, you are going to spend the rest of your life in prison." Lacy said nothing. She was already thinking about what she would post once this was over. Once she was acquitted and could tell her side of the story. The comeback would be legendary. Meanwhile, in a conference room down the hall, Sandra Hillman was meeting with Detective McPherson and Dr. Tsai. "The video is ready," Hillman said. "We have verified the chain of custody and the metadata is airtight. I wanted to introduce it tomorrow." McPherson nodded. "It is going to be hard to watch." Hillman met her eyes. "Good. The jury needs to see exactly who Lacy Downs is." The next morning, the courtroom was tense with anticipation. Word had spread that the prosecution was preparing to introduce critical evidence, and the gallery was even more crowded than usual. Tessa's family sat in their usual spot, holding hands, bracing themselves. Hillman stood and addressed the court. "Your Honor, the state calls Dr. Raymond Tsai to authenticate a piece of evidence." Dr. Tsai returned to the stand and was reminded he was still under oath. Hillman asked him to describe the video file once more, walking the jury through every technical detail. The file had been recovered from Lacy's cloud account. It had been authenticated through metadata analysis. It had been preserved according to strict chain of custody protocols. Grant objected repeatedly, arguing that the video was prejudicial, that it would unfairly influence the jury. Judge Briggs overruled each objection. "The video is directly relevant to the charges," she said. "The jury has a right to see it." Hillman approached the bench with a USB drive. "Your Honor, the state wishes to introduce Exhibit 58, the complete live stream recording from June 6th. Judge Briggs took the drive and handed it to the bailiff, who loaded it onto the courtroom's video system. A large screen was positioned so that both the jury and the gallery could see it. The lights in the courtroom dimmed slightly. Hillman looked at the jury. "What you are about to see is the unedited live stream that Lacy Downs broadcast on the day Tessa Marlowe died. I warn you, it is disturbing. But it is the truth." She nodded to the bailiff, who pressed play. The screen flickered to life. The video was surprisingly clear, shot in the late afternoon sunlight. The camera was positioned to show Lacy's face in the foreground and the quarry edge behind her. Lacy was smiling, her expression bright and animated. The viewer count in the corner of the screen showed over 2,000 people watching live. Lacy's voice came through the speakers, cheerful and energetic. "Hey guys, welcome to the stream. We are at Crestfall Quarry, and I have a special surprise for you today. My girl Tessa is here with me." The camera swung to show Tessa standing a few feet away, closer to the edge. Tessa looked uncomfortable, her arms crossed. She forced a smile when the camera focused on her. "Hey everyone," Lacy's voice continued. "So, Tessa and I are going to do a little challenge. Truth or Dare, Quarry Edition." She laughed, and the sound was bright and false. The video continued. Lacy and Tessa bantered for a moment, but the tension between them was palpable. Tessa kept glancing toward the edge, clearly nervous about how close they were standing. Lacy seemed oblivious. Or perhaps she simply did not care. Then Lacy's tone changed. She stepped closer to Tessa, the camera still recording. "You know what, Tessa? I have been thinking. You have been doing really well lately, getting all those new followers, all those sponsors." Tessa shifted uncomfortably. "Lacy, can we not do this right now?" Lacy's smile hardened. "Do what?" "I'm just saying, it is funny how you went from nobody to somebody so fast. Almost like you copied someone's whole vibe." The jury watched in silence. On the screen, Tessa's face flushed. I did not copy you, Lacy. Lacy laughed, but there was no humor in it. Sure, whatever helps you sleep at night. Then, in a movement so quick it almost seemed accidental, Lacy stepped forward and shoved Tessa with both hands. Tessa's arms flailed, her mouth opening in a scream that was cut short as she toppled backward over the edge. The camera wobbled as Lacy stepped forward to look down. For a moment, the screen showed only sky. Then Lacy's face filled the frame again. She was breathing hard, but her expression was not shock or horror. It was something colder, satisfied. She looked directly into the camera and spoke, her voice low and steady. She had it coming. Do not mess with me. Then the screen went black. The stream had ended. The courtroom was silent. Not a single person moved. Several jurors had their hands over their mouths. Tessa's mother was sobbing, her husband holding her tightly. Even the reporters in the back seemed stunned into stillness. Lacy sat frozen at the defense table. Her hands were clamped on the edge of the table, her knuckles white. Her face had gone pale, her eyes wide and unfocused. For the first time since the trial began, she had no performance left. The mask had shattered. Grant sat beside her, his head bowed, one hand covering his face. He had known the video was bad, but seeing it play out in open court, watching the jury's reaction, he knew the case was lost. Judge Briggs let the silence stretch for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice cutting through the stillness. The court will take a 15-minute recess. The bailiffs moved to escort the jury out. As they filed past, several of them looked at Lacy with expressions of pure revulsion. One woman was crying. Lacy was led back to the holding room. She sat in the chair, staring at the wall, her mind racing. This could not be happening. The video was supposed to be deleted. She had deleted it. She had checked. How had they found it? Grant entered the room, his face grim. He sat across from her and said nothing for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. That video just convicted you. Lacy's voice was small, shaking. It does not show the whole story. Grant stared at her. Lacy, it shows you pushing her. It shows you laughing. It shows you saying she deserved it. What part of the story is missing? Lacy's eyes filled with tears, real ones this time, born not of remorse, but of panic. I did not mean it. I was just angry. I did not think she would actually fall. Grant leaned back, exhausted. It does not matter what you meant. What matters is what you did. And the jury just watched you do it. When court resumed, Hillman rested the state's case. Grant declined to call any witnesses for the defense. There was nothing left to say. The video had said it all. Closing arguments were brief. Hillman stood before the jury and spoke with quiet intensity. You have seen the evidence. You have heard the testimony. But most importantly, you have seen the truth with your own eyes. Lacy Downs murdered Tessa Marlowe because she was jealous, because she valued her online image more than her friend's life. She pushed Tessa off that ledge, and then she deleted the evidence and lied to all of you. But the truth does not stay buried, and now you have the power to hold her accountable. Grant tried his best. He argued that Lacy was a child, that she had acted impulsively, that she deserved a chance at rehabilitation. But his words fell flat. The jury had seen the video. They had heard Lacy's voice. She had it coming. Do not mess with me. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood and read the verdict. We find the defendant, Lacy Downs, guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom erupted. Tessa's family wept with relief. Lacy sat motionless, her face blank, her mind unable to process what had just happened. She had been so sure she could control the narrative, that she could perform her way out of this. But the performance was over. Judge Briggs set the sentencing hearing for the following week. On the day of sentencing, the courtroom was once again filled to capacity. Lacy entered in her orange jumpsuit, her hair unwashed, her face bare of makeup. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. The confidence that had carried her through the trial was gone, replaced by a hollow numbness. Judge Briggs allowed victim impact statements before sentencing. Tessa's mother, Tessa Marlowe, stood first. She walked slowly to the podium, clutching a photograph of Tessa. Her voice shook as she spoke. My daughter was 17 years old. She was kind, creative, and full of life. She loved music and art and making people laugh. She had dreams of going to college, of becoming a filmmaker. And Lacy Downs took all of that away. She took Tessa's future. She took my baby. Angela's voice broke, and she paused, gathering herself. What haunts me most is that Tessa trusted Lacy. She thought they were friends, and Lacy used that trust to lure her to that quarry and push her to her death. Then she smiled for the cameras and pretended to grieve. I will never forgive her. Never. Tessa's younger sister, Emma, spoke next. She was 14, and her voice was quiet but steady. Tessa was my best friend. She helped me with my homework. She taught me how to do makeup. She was always there for me, and now she is gone. The silence in our house is unbearable. I keep waiting for her to come home, but she never will. Lacy destroyed our family. And for what? For followers? For attention? It was not worth it. Tessa's life was worth so much more. When the family had finished, Judge Briggs turned her attention to Lacy. She removed her glasses and set them on the bench, her gaze steady and unyielding. Miss Downs, this court has witnessed your performance for weeks. From the moment you entered this courtroom, you have treated these proceedings as if they were another opportunity for content. You waved at cameras. You smiled at reporters. You whispered to your attorney about how the jury was watching you. You turned a murder trial into a stage. Lacy sat with her head down, her hands folded in her lap. She did not look up. Judge Briggs continued, her voice gaining strength. But the video you created, the video you broadcast to thousands of people, revealed the truth behind the performance. It showed us who you really are. You are not a victim. You are not misunderstood. You are a young woman who valued your image, your follower count, your online persona more than you valued human life. She paused, letting the words settle. Tessa Marlowe was your friend. She trusted you. And when she began to succeed, when her authenticity resonated with people in a way your manufactured persona never could, you saw her as a threat. You could not tolerate being outshined, so you decided to eliminate the competition. Judge Briggs leaned forward, her voice hard. You lured Tessa to that quarry under the pretense of creating content. You argued with her, belittled her, and then you pushed her off a 60-foot cliff. You watched her fall. You watched her die. And then you looked into the camera and said she deserved it. Lacy's shoulders began to shake. Tears streamed down her face, but she made no sound. The judge was relentless. After you killed her, you deleted the evidence. You told the police it was an accident. You cried for the cameras and played the role of the grieving friend. But you were not grieving. You were calculating. You were managing your image, controlling the narrative, ensuring that you remained the center of attention. Judge Briggs sat back, her expression one of profound disappointment. You are 16 years old, and you have already demonstrated a level of narcissism and cruelty that most people never reach in a lifetime. You treated Tessa's death as content, as something to be broadcast and consumed. You showed no remorse, no empathy, no recognition of the enormity of what you had done. She picked up the sentencing document. The law recognizes that you are a juvenile, and it requires me to consider your age in sentencing. But the law also recognizes that some crimes are so heinous, so devoid of humanity, that they demand the maximum penalty. Judge Briggs looked directly at Lacy. You planned this murder. You executed it. You tried to cover it up. And you did it all for the most shallow of reasons. To protect your online reputation. You killed, not in passion, not in self-defense, not even for money. You killed for likes, for followers, for attention. Her voice rose. Tessa Marlowe's life had value. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend. She had dreams and talents and a future that stretched out before her. You stole all of that. You erased her so that you could remain relevant. And that is unforgivable. Judge Briggs read from the document. This court sentences you to 35 years to life in the North Carolina Department of Corrections. Additionally, you are sentenced to 3 years for obstruction of justice, to run consecutively. You will be eligible for parole after serving 38 years. She set the paper down and looked at Lacy one last time. You sought followers, Miss Downs. What you earned was accountability. You wanted to be famous, to be watched, to be admired. Now you will be remembered not as an influencer, but as a murderer. That is your legacy. Judge Briggs brought down the gavel. This court is adjourned. Lacy was led away by the bailiffs. She walked with her head down, her hands cuffed in front of her, her makeup-streaked face a portrait of ruin. The cameras captured every step, every tear, every moment of her collapse. For the first time in her life, Lacy Downs was silent. In the weeks that followed, the case became a catalyst for change. The North Carolina State Legislature introduced a bill aimed at addressing reckless social media challenges among minors. The proposed law would hold platforms accountable for content that encouraged dangerous behavior and would impose stricter penalties for crimes committed in the pursuit of online fame. The bill was nicknamed Tessa's Law, and it gained widespread support. Tessa's family established a foundation in her name, dedicated to promoting authentic self-expression and mental health awareness among teenagers. They spoke at schools and community events, warning young people about the dangers of equating self-worth with online metrics. Lacy Downs was transferred to a juvenile detention facility where she would remain until her 18th birthday, at which point she would be moved to an adult prison. In her cell, she no longer had access to social media. No followers, no likes, no comments. Just silence. Detective McPherson kept a photo of Tessa Marlowe on her desk, a reminder of why the work mattered. She had seen many cases in her career, but this one stayed with her. The coldness of it, the calculation, the utter absence of remorse. Sandra Hillman moved on to other cases, but the Downs trial remained one of her most significant victories. She had proven that even in the age of digital performance, the truth could still be uncovered. Evidence could not be filtered or edited away. Justice could still be served. And in the courthouse corridor, after the sentencing, as reporters shouted questions and cameras flashed, the sound of it all began to fade. The echo of shutter clicks, the murmur of voices, the hum of media machinery. It all grew quieter, like applause finally ending after a performance no one had asked for. Tessa's family walked out together, holding each other, stepping into the sunlight. They had waited months for this moment, for the acknowledgement that Tessa's life had mattered, that her death would not be forgotten or dismissed as a tragic accident. They had fought for the truth, and they had won. Inside the empty courtroom, Judge Briggs sat alone for a moment, gathering her thoughts. She had delivered many sentences in her career, but few had carried the weight of this one. A 16-year-old girl sentenced to nearly 4 decades in prison. It was a tragedy on every level, but it was also justice. She thought about the video, the cold clarity of it. She had it coming. Do not mess with me. Those words would haunt her. They were the epitome of a culture that valued image over substance, performance over authenticity, attention over empathy. Lacy Downs had been raised in that culture, had thrived in it, and had ultimately been destroyed by it. Judge Briggs stood and left the courtroom, her robes trailing behind her. Outside, the world continued. News cycles moved on. Social media feeds refreshed. New influencers rose and fell. But in Meadow Ridge County, in the hearts of those who had known Tessa Marlowe, the memory remained. A bright, kind, creative girl whose life had been stolen for the most meaningless of reasons. And in a cell in a detention facility, Lacy Downs sat on her bunk, staring at the concrete wall. She thought about her followers, about the comments she used to read, about the validation she had craved. It all seemed so distant now, so hollow. She had built her entire identity on the approval of strangers, and in the end, it had meant nothing. She had traded a life for likes, and now she had neither. The performance was over. The audience had left, and Lacy Downs was alone with the truth she had tried so hard to bury. The truth that had been captured in high definition, broadcast to thousands, and preserved forever in the digital record. The truth that she was not the victim of a tragic accident, but the architect of a calculated murder. The truth that no amount of filters, no carefully crafted caption, no perfectly angled selfie could ever erase. In the end, the only legacy Lacy Downs would leave behind was a cautionary tale. A warning about the dangers of narcissism, the emptiness of online fame, and the irreversible consequences of valuing image over humanity. Her name would be remembered, but not in the way she had imagined. Not as an influencer, not as a star, but as the girl who killed her friend for followers. And Tessa Marlowe, whose voice had been silenced, would be remembered for who she truly was. Kind, creative, authentic. A light that had been extinguished far too soon, but whose memory would continue to shine in the hearts of those who loved her. The final image, the one that would linger long after the news cameras packed up and the courtroom emptied, was not of Lacy's tears or her downfall. It was of Tessa's smile, captured in photographs and videos, a reminder that behind every screen, every follower count, every viral moment, there are real people with real lives. And those lives matter far more than any performance ever could.